Michael Carter was 32 years old. He lived in a small apartment in Chicago. Every morning, his alarm rang at 6 a.m. He woke up feeling tired, drank a cup of black coffee, and rushed to catch the train. His life looked normal from the outside, but inside, he felt empty. He worked as a cashier in a grocery store. The job paid just enough to cover rent, food, and bills. At the end of every month, his bank account was almost empty. Sometimes, he stood at the store window and watched expensive cars drive past. He wondered how other people seemed so successful while he stayed in the same place year after year. One evening, after another long shift, Michael sat alone in a small park. The cold wind touched his face. He looked at the city lights and whispered to himself, "Is this all my life will ever be?" He had asked himself that question many times before. Years earlier, Michael had dreamed of becoming a writer. He loved telling stories. In college, his professors often praised his work. They believed he had talent. But life became difficult. His father became sick. His family needed money. Michael dropped out of college and accepted the first job he could find. He told himself it was temporary. 1 year became 2. 2 years became 5. 5 years became 10. His dream slowly disappeared. That night, while walking home, Michael passed a small bookstore. A sign outside caught his attention. "One decision today can change your future forever." He stopped, walking. He stared at those words for almost a minute. Something inside him felt different. He entered the bookstore. The owner was an old man with gray hair and kind eyes. "What are you looking for?" the old man asked. Michael smiled weakly. "I honestly don't know." The old man looked at him carefully. "Sometimes people don't need a new book," he said. "They need a new decision." Those words stayed in Michael's mind. Before leaving, he bought a notebook and a simple black pen. The notebook cost only $10. It was the smallest purchase he had made all week. But he had no idea it would become the most valuable thing he would ever own. That night, instead of watching television, Michael opened the notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "My life changes today." Then he made one promise. "I will write 1 page every single day. No excuses." It sounded like a small decision. Just 1 page. Not a novel. Not a book. Just 1 page. The next morning, he woke up 30 minutes earlier. He wanted to sleep. His body begged him to stay in bed. But he remembered his promise. He wrote 1 page before going to work. The writing wasn't perfect. It wasn't beautiful. But it was honest. Day after day, he continued. After 1 week, he had 7 pages. After 1 month, he had 31 pages. For the first time in years, he felt proud of himself. Nothing in his life had changed yet. His job was still the same. His apartment was still small. His salary was still low. But something inside him had changed. He had started believing in himself again. One afternoon at work, a customer noticed Michael writing during his lunch break. "What are you writing?" The customer asked. "A story," Michael answered. The customer smiled. "I hope one day I can read it." That simple sentence filled Michael with hope. Someone believed he could finish. That evening, he worked even harder. Weeks turned into months. Every morning, he wrote. Every night, he improved his story. He stopped wasting hours scrolling on his phone. He stopped complaining about life. Instead, he focused on becoming 1% better every day. His friends laughed. "You think writing will make you rich?" Michael smiled. "I don't know, but doing nothing definitely won't." Many people doubted him. Some even called him foolish. Yet, he continued, because, for the first time in years, he had a reason to wake up. One rainy Sunday, exactly 6 months after buying the notebook, Michael placed the final period on the last page of his first novel. He looked at the stack of papers. His hands were shaking. He couldn't believe it. He had finished something he once thought was impossible. Tears slowly rolled down his face. Not because he had become successful, not because he had earned money, but because he had kept his promise. He remembered the old man in the bookstore. Sometimes people don't need a new book. They need a new decision. Michael finally understood. Success doesn't begin with $1 million. It doesn't begin with luck. It begins with one small decision, followed by hundreds of small actions. That single decision had already changed his life. Michael held the finished manuscript in his hands and smiled. It was the first time in years that he had completed something meaningful. The pages represented hundreds of early mornings, late nights, and moments when he almost gave up. But finishing the book was only the beginning. The next week, Michael searched online for publishers. He carefully prepared his manuscript, wrote a professional cover letter, and sent it to 10 publishing companies. Then he waited. Every morning before work, he checked his email. Nothing. After 2 weeks, the first reply arrived. "Thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, your manuscript is not the right fit for us." Michael felt disappointed, but he reminded himself that one rejection did not define his future. Soon, another email arrived. Another rejection. Then another. Within 2 months, all 10 publishers had rejected his book. He sat quietly in his apartment, staring at the screen. For a moment, he questioned everything. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not good enough. He closed his laptop and walked outside. Snow was falling gently over the streets of Chicago. Families laughed together. Friends shared coffee, and life continued as usual. Michael wondered if he should stop writing forever. That evening, he visited the same bookstore where his journey had begun. The old owner recognized him immediately. "You look troubled," the old man said. Michael nodded. "I finished my book." "That's wonderful." But every publisher rejected it. The old man smiled. "So?" Michael looked surprised. "So? Doesn't that mean I failed?" The old man slowly shook his head. "No, you failed only if you stop." Those simple words stayed in Michael's heart. Before leaving, the old man handed him another notebook. "This one is a gift." Michael looked confused. "What should I do with it?" "Write your second story." Michael laughed. "I couldn't even publish the first one." The old man smiled warmly. Successful people don't wait for permission to keep going. That night, Michael opened the new notebook. Instead of writing about failure, he wrote down everything he had learned. Every rejection became a lesson. Every mistake became experience. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" he began asking, "What can this teach me?" That small change completely transformed his mindset. Over the following weeks, Michael read books about storytelling, communication, and successful authors. He realized something important. Great writers were not born great. They became great by writing every single day. One Saturday, Michael joined a local writing club. At first, he felt nervous. Everyone seemed more experienced. Some members had already published books. Others had won writing competitions. Michael almost walked away. Then he remembered his promise. One small decision. He entered the room. When it was his turn to read a chapter from his novel, his hands shook. His voice was quiet. But as he continued reading, something unexpected happened. The room became completely silent. Everyone listened carefully. When he finished, nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, an elderly woman smiled. "You have something many writers don't." Michael looked at her. "What is that?" Heart. Those single words meant more than any paycheck he had ever received. For the first time, strangers believed in his talent. Of course, they also gave him honest criticism. They pointed out weak chapters. Some dialogue sounded unnatural. Certain scenes were too long. Instead of feeling offended, Michael wrote every suggestion into his notebook. He realized that criticism was not an attack. It was an opportunity to improve. Every week, he rewrote his manuscript. Every chapter became stronger. Every sentence became clearer. Months passed. His writing improved more than he had imagined. One afternoon, his manager at the grocery store called him into the office. "Michael, we've noticed you've been distracted lately." Michael apologized. "I'm sorry." His manager sighed. "We're reducing staff." Michael felt his heart sink. "I'm afraid today is your last day." Just like that, he lost the only income he had. He packed his small locker. A few co-workers shook his hand. Others wished him luck. Walking home, fear filled his mind. Rent was due in 2 weeks. His savings were almost gone. He had never been unemployed before. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling for hours. Negative thoughts filled his mind. Maybe I should forget writing and look for another job immediately. Maybe dreams are only for lucky people. The next morning, he opened his notebook. On the first page, he saw the sentence he had written months ago. "My life changes today." He smiled. His circumstances had changed, but his decision had not. Instead of giving up, Michael created a strict daily routine. Morning, write for 3 hours. Afternoon, apply for jobs. Evening, edit his manuscript and continue learning. Days became weeks. Money became tighter. Sometimes he skipped meals to save cash. Sometimes he walked instead of taking the train. Life became harder than ever. Yet, he never missed a single day of writing. Then, one rainy afternoon, an email appeared in his inbox. It was not from a publisher. It was from a literary agent. She had somehow discovered a sample chapter. Michael had posted online months earlier. Her message was short. I enjoyed your story. If you're interested, I'd like to read the complete manuscript. Michael read the email 3 times. His heart raced. His hands trembled. It wasn't a publishing contract. It wasn't success. But, for the first time, someone from the publishing world wanted to give him a real chance. Michael whispered to himself, maybe. That one small decision is finally opening the first door. He took a deep breath, attached his manuscript, and pressed send. Then he looked out the window at the gray Chicago sky. For the first time in many months, hope felt stronger than fear. Part 3. The Biggest Challenge. Michael stared at the screen after sending his manuscript to the literary agent. His heart was beating faster than ever before. He had no idea what would happen next. For the first time in years, someone in the publishing world had shown genuine interest in his work. Now, all he could do was wait. Days passed slowly. Every morning, Michael checked his email before making coffee. Nothing. He tried to stay busy by writing new ideas in his notebook. He reminded himself that worrying would not change the outcome. A week later, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Hello? Hi, is this Michael Carter? Yes, this is Emma Brooks. Michael immediately recognized the name. She was the literary agent. His hands began to shake. I finished reading your manuscript, Emma said. Michael held his breath. You have real talent. For a moment, he couldn't speak. But, Emma continued, your story still needs work. Michael smiled. He wasn't disappointed. This wasn't another rejection. Emma believed the story could become something special. I'm willing to work with you, she said, if you're willing to rewrite it. Michael answered without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes. Over the next 3 months, Emma became his mentor. She didn't simply praise his work. She challenged him. This chapter feels rushed. Your main character needs more emotion. Readers must feel every victory and every loss. Sometimes, Michael spent 12 hours rewriting a single chapter. Sometimes he deleted pages he had loved. It was painful, but he trusted the process. Every edit made the story stronger. One evening, after another long editing session, Michael looked at the old notebook he had bought months earlier. The first page still read, My life changes today. He smiled. That sentence had carried him through every difficult moment. Meanwhile, money was becoming a serious problem. He had found only part-time work delivering groceries. He worked early in the morning, edited his novel during the day, wrote new ideas at night. Most days, he slept only 5 hours. His body was exhausted. His mind was tired. But his dream kept him moving. One afternoon, while delivering groceries to a large house, Michael noticed shelves filled with books. The homeowner invited him inside for a glass of water. You like books? The man asked. I hope to publish one someday. The man smiled. I've published 4. Michael's eyes widened. For the next 30 minutes, they talked about writing, rejection, and success. Before Michael left, the author gave him one piece of advice. Never chase success. Chase excellence. If you become excellent, success eventually finds you. Michael wrote those words in his notebook as soon as he got home. Weeks later, Emma called again. "I've finished the final edit." Michael waited nervously. "I think we're ready." She submitted the manuscript to several major publishers. The waiting began again. This time, Michael felt more confident, not because he expected success, but because he had become stronger. He had learned that rejection was not the end. It was part of the journey. 3 weeks later, another email arrived. Emma called immediately. "Michael!" Her voice sounded excited. "We have an offer." Michael froze. "What?" "A publishing company wants your book." For several seconds, he couldn't breathe. All the mornings, all the sleepless nights, all the rejection, all the sacrifices, they had finally led to this moment. Tears filled his eyes. He remembered the small bookstore, the old man, the notebook. One small decision. Nothing would have happened without that first step. A month later, Michael held the first printed copy of his novel. He slowly opened the cover. There it was. His name, printed on a real book. He gently touched the letters with his fingers. It felt unreal. Emma smiled. "You earned this." Michael shook his head. "No, I earned the opportunity. The real journey is only beginning." Emma laughed. "Exactly." The publisher arranged a small book signing at a local bookstore. Michael expected maybe 10 people. Instead, more than 50 readers arrived. Some had already read advance copies. One young woman stood in line with tears in her eyes. When she reached Michael's table, she said quietly. He gently touched the letters with his fingers. It felt unreal. Emma smiled. "You earned this." Michael shook his head. "No! I earned the opportunity. The real journey is only beginning." Emma laughed. Exactly. The publisher arranged a small book signing at a local bookstore. Michael expected maybe 10 people. Instead, more than 50 readers arrived. Some had already read advance copies. One young woman stood in line with tears in her eyes. When she reached Michael's table, she said quietly, "Your story helped me when I wanted to give up." Michael looked at her silently. At that moment, he realized something important. His book wasn't just changing his own life. It was beginning to change other people's lives too. That night, after everyone had gone home, Michael returned to the same park where, months earlier, he had asked himself, "Is this all my life will ever be?" He smiled at the city lights. The answer had changed. Not because life had become easy, but because he had become stronger. He understood that success wasn't built in one day. It was built through thousands of small decisions, repeated every single day. As he looked at the skyline, his phone vibrated again. It was Emma. "Michael," she said excitedly, "I've just received incredible news. A national television show wants to interview you next week." Michael closed his eyes. He smiled. His biggest dream was no longer impossible. It was becoming reality. But he had no idea that the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity was still waiting for him. Part 4. Success After Sacrifice. Michael hardly slept the night before his television interview. He kept thinking about everything that had happened over the past year. Not long ago, he had been a grocery store cashier who believed his dreams were over. Now, producers from a national TV show wanted to hear his story. As he stood in front of the studio mirror, he quietly whispered to himself, "Just be honest." When the interview began, the host smiled and asked, "Michael, everyone wants to know the secret behind your success. What changed your life?" Michael didn't mention money. He didn't mention luck. He simply smiled and answered, "One small decision." The audience looked confused. He continued, "I decided to write just one page every day. That single decision slowly changed everything." The interview spread across social media within hours. Thousands of people shared his words. Readers from different states began buying his book. For the first time in his life, Michael received royalty payments. The money was more than he had ever earned in a single month. He paid his overdue rent. He cleared his debts. He bought a better laptop. But he refused to waste money on expensive cars or luxury clothes. Instead, he invested in learning. He attended writing workshops. He hired professional editors. He continued reading every day. One afternoon, Emma called him with exciting news. "Michael, your book has entered the national bestseller list." Michael stood silently in his apartment. He remembered every rejection letter, every lonely morning, every difficult decision. Tears filled his eyes again. "I never imagined this," he whispered. Emma smiled. "I did." Life seemed perfect, but success brought new challenges. As Michael became famous, interviews, meetings, and travel filled his schedule. Some days, he was so busy that he stopped writing. At first, he thought it was only temporary. But weeks passed. His notebook remained empty. One evening, he opened it and stared at the blank page. He suddenly realized something. He had become busy building a career, but he had stopped doing the thing that created it. That frightened him. The next morning, he canceled several unnecessary meetings. His manager was surprised. "These interviews are important." Michael nodded. "So is my writing." He returned to his morning routine. Every sunrise, before checking emails or answering phone calls, he wrote one page. The habit that had built his dream became the habit that protected it. Months later, Michael started writing his second novel. This time, expectations were much higher. His publisher wanted another bestseller. Readers expected something even better. The pressure was enormous. For the first time since becoming successful, Michael experienced writer's block. Hours passed without writing a single sentence. He became frustrated. Negative thoughts returned. He became frustrated. Negative thoughts returned. What if my first book was just luck? What if I disappoint everyone? One evening, he visited the old bookstore again. The same elderly owner smiled as Michael walked inside. "I was wondering when you'd come back." Michael laughed softly. "I think I forgot something." The old man handed him the very first notebook Michael had bought. He had left it there months earlier during one of his visits. Michael slowly opened it. The first page still read, "My life changes today." He turned another page, then another. He saw crossed-out ideas, messy paragraphs, mistakes everywhere. He smiled. His first book had never been perfect, It became great because he kept improving it. The old man looked at him kindly. You don't need confidence to begin. You need courage. Michael thanked him and walked home with a peaceful heart. That night, he wrote the first chapter of his second novel. It wasn't perfect, but it existed. Weeks later, disaster struck. A massive storm caused flooding in part of the city. Michael's apartment building suffered serious damage. Water entered his home. Furniture was ruined. Books were destroyed. His laptop stopped working. For a moment, it felt like he had lost everything. But when the cleanup began, Michael searched through the damaged room. Under a broken shelf, he found something. His black notebook. It was wet around the edges, but most of the pages had survived. He held it tightly against his chest. He smiled through his tears. Material things could disappear, but discipline, determination, and hope could never be washed away. That experience changed him forever. A few months later, Michael used part of his earnings to create a free writing program for teenagers who couldn't afford expensive courses. Every Saturday morning, he taught young writers how to believe in themselves. At the end of each class, he gave every student a simple notebook, just like the one that had changed his own life. He always repeated the same sentence: big dreams begin with small decisions. One afternoon, after class, a 12-year-old boy stayed behind. My family says my dream is impossible. Michael smiled gently. They told me the same thing. The boy looked hopeful. So what should I do? Michael handed him a black pen. Write your first page. Years later, Michael would remember that conversation as one of the happiest moments of his life, because success was no longer measured by book sales or television interviews. It was measured by the lives he inspired. One evening, Emma called again. Michael, I have incredible news. What happened? A Hollywood producer just finished reading your novel. Michael's heart skipped a beat. They want to turn your story into a movie. Michael looked out the window at the city lights, the same city where he had once believed his life would never change. He smiled quietly. Part 5. A New Life and a Powerful Ending. Michael sat quietly in his apartment, holding the phone in his hand. Emma's words echoed in his mind. A Hollywood producer wants to turn your story into a movie. For several minutes, he couldn't move. A year ago, he had been worried about paying rent. Now, people around the world wanted to hear his story. But Michael knew something important. The movie wasn't the greatest reward. The greatest reward was becoming the person he had always dreamed of being. A few weeks later, Michael flew to Los Angeles for the first time. As the airplane landed, he looked out of the window and smiled. Years ago, he had watched movies and imagined successful people living in this city. He never believed he would one day be one of them. At the movie studio, producers welcomed him warmly. One producer shook his hand and said, Michael, your story isn't just about writing. It's about hope. Those words touched his heart. The team spent months adapting his novel into a screenplay. Michael attended meetings, discussed scenes, and shared his real-life experiences. He wanted the movie to inspire people, not just entertain them. One evening, while walking through Hollywood, Michael saw his reflection in a store window. He stopped. For a moment, he remembered the man he used to be, the tired cashier, the young man who believed life had forgotten him, the man who almost gave up. He smiled at his reflection. "Thank you," he whispered, not to anyone else, to the younger version of himself, the version that chose not to quit. Months later, the movie was released. Millions of people watched it. The reviews were incredible. Social media was filled with messages. People from different countries wrote to Michael. One message came from a teenage girl. She wrote, "I was ready to give up on my dream. After watching your story, I opened a notebook and started writing again." Another message came from a retired man. "I'm 65 years old. I thought it was too late to begin. Tomorrow I'm starting my first business." A young soldier wrote, "Your story reminded me that courage is choosing to continue, even when life is difficult." Michael read every message carefully. He realized something beautiful. Dreams are contagious. When one person refuses to give up, others find the courage to keep going too. Several years passed. Michael became one of the most respected motivational authors in America. His books were translated into many languages. He spoke at schools, universities, and international conferences. Yet no matter how successful he became, one habit never changed. Every morning, before checking emails, before making phone calls, before attending meetings, he opened a notebook and he wrote one page. Just one page, exactly as he had promised himself years earlier. One autumn afternoon, Michael returned to Chicago. He walked through the streets where everything had started. The grocery store where he had worked was still there. The park where he had once questioned his future was unchanged. Finally, he arrived at the small bookstore. The bell above the door rang softly. The elderly owner was sitting behind the counter, reading a book. He looked up and smiled. "I knew you'd come back." Michael smiled. "I came to say thank you." The old man laughed gently. "You don't need to thank me. I only sold you a notebook." Michael shook his head. "No, you gave me something much bigger. You gave me permission to believe in myself." The old man remained silent. After a few moments, he pointed toward a shelf near the entrance. Michael turned around. There, displayed proudly, was his very first novel. A small handwritten sign underneath read, "One small decision can change an entire life." Michael's eyes filled with tears. He finally understood. Success wasn't about becoming famous. Success wasn't about money. Success wasn't even about writing books. Success was about becoming the best version of yourself. Before leaving the bookstore, Michael bought another simple black notebook. The old man smiled. "Starting another book?" Michael grinned. "No, starting another dream." That evening, Michael sat on the same park bench where his journey had begun many years earlier. The city lights sparkled in the distance. He opened the brand new notebook. On the very first page, he wrote the same sentence that had changed everything. "My life changes today." Then he smiled, because he finally understood the greatest lesson of all. Your future is not decided by one lucky moment. It is built by the small choices you make every single day. One page, One step, one habit, one decision. Those tiny actions, repeated with patience and courage, have the power to transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary one. And somewhere, perhaps in another city, perhaps in another country, someone was standing at the beginning of their own journey. Someone who believed it was too late. Someone who thought they weren't talented enough. Someone who was waiting for the perfect moment. If Michael could speak to that person, he would say only this: